Okay, hello. This is CS471, 571 operating systems, and I want to talk about upcoming homework assignments. Okay, so for homework 3A, I want you to make a new system call. System call is going to be called system load, and in that system call, I want you to take as a parameter a structure. So you're going to make a new structure, struct system info, and initially these are things that I thought to put in there. I want you to tell me how much memory is being used by all processes, how many processes are there currently, and how many CPUs are there. Okay, so what you should do you want to do something similar to my usage system call. So the usage system call does all that stuff. It has a struct that it returns as well. It's just different information. So whereas my system call here, usage, it goes and calls my little proc dump function and then goes and looks inside of the my proc. All right, that's what my system call does. Now for your system call, it needs to get this information, which really needs to look at the information about all the processes. Okay, so I want to talk about the list of all the processes, and I'm going to say in my information about xv6 we have a process table. So what we can think about this is a list, it's an array or some kind of data structure with information about all processes, right? We are looking at this is like one row in the process table. So in xv6, this is the struct proc. So rows in this table are struct proc. Okay, so what I want to look up is where does the operating system and where in the code is this list or array of struct procs. So one thing you could do is you could look for struct proc everywhere. All right, somewhere there's going to be an array declared of struct proc stars, of pointers, and there we go. There's struct proc. It's an array of struct proc, so that's the memory to keep that as well. Let's look at proc.c. Okay, struct proc and p table for process table. All right, so process table has inside of it these struct procs and whatever this spin lock is, which we haven't talked about yet. Okay, so what you could do once you know that there's a variable called p-table, then you could go start writing code to look at p-table.proc bracket 0. But that could be dangerous because this is an important operating system data structure, and what happens if I'm looking inside of this while some other code is running? Right, I get interrupted by some other process, and is there going to be an issue of multiple different processes accessing this at the same time? So I'll put this under when writing OS code. So one thing to do was to be paranoid about user processes. We also have to be careful about synchronization. So even though we're the operating system, we might get interrupted while executing some other process, possibly a system call for that process, or an interrupt handler for that process. Some other process executes before we finish. Or even maybe multiple processes accessing at the same exact time if you have multiple cores or multiple CPUs. All right, so this is another one that we have to be careful about. All right, so instead of just going and using this variable that I found, I want to look for code that uses the p table. So I can look in here for p table, and I find a function called hw3a, which is used in fork. So when fork gets called, it makes a new process. As part of that, it needs to find a spot in the process table to keep the information about this new process. And here is code for it. So in this hw3a, it's doing something acquiring a lock. So that's probably trying to make sure only one process at a time is actually modifying this process table. So we look at the array there in the process table, and so so this p is a pointer. This ptable.proc is an array. If you just leave the array there without brackets, then p is the pointer to that first element in the array. As long as p isn't gotten to the end, so nproc would be one spot too far, because there's only nproc. If we went back up here, there's only nproc slots. We start counting at 0. So this would be one past the last spot in the table, and then the address of that, because it's pointers. And so as long as p isn't at the end, we look, and if the p state is unused, then we found a spot, and it goes to found. All right, if it never finds anything, then it releases the lock and returns 0, which is going to be a null pointer. It's returning a pointer here. So 0 is probably an error condition by whoever's using hw3a. All right, if it's found, then it's going to do information to set up this new process. I'm not so concerned about that. All right, so the moral of the story for us, for now, do something similar to Jeff's usage system call in terms of defining a new structure, passing a pointer to that. All right, and I'll say note, do something like hw3a in terms of accessing the process table. Okay, so that shows there's some code that's looking at the process table, and in our system call, we're supposed to figure out how many total processes are there running. Well, you go through the table and count how many spots have whatever state. So you also need to look up the possible values for state. There's there's unused, there's probably going to be others. Look it up in one of the .h files. So it's going to be one of the files included here. It's probably going to be proc.h. Okay. Counting up the amount of virtual memory, so user virtual memory. How much used, then you're going to look and add up the size for all the entries in the process table. Okay, total number of CPUs, I believe it's going to be 2, but look it up to what you need to, where you find that in the code. All right, so you're going to have that as a new system call, and then write a utility program free that uses the system. I called the name of the system call, system load, and the structure system info. So use your new system call and print out the total amount of memory used and the number of processes and the number of CPUs. Make the free program, use the dot, understand the -h, like the program on the CS server does. Okay, to be determined how I'm going to collect this. Just make it work in your own system. Let's say you do this in your hw3a. I think I told you to have a directory like that. Okay. I'm thinking this is worth 10 points. We can negotiate. All right, that's enough for homework 3A. Good luck.